This right here, this is what I went through to get this video done. I really hope it was worth it, because believe me, I don't ever want to have to go through this again. Hello everybody and welcome back to another War Thunder video, but this is not just any War Thunder video, this is my Challenger review video. Ever since I did my first impressions video for this tank, I get the feeling most of you guys have been waiting quite eagerly for this. So, let's get started, shall we? First, I'm going to say that she is a little bit of a disappointment, but hey, to the hangar. Waiting this. As far as I know, there may have been looks at this tank, but never in-depth reviews of it until now, so I'm probably wrong about that. It wouldn't be the first time I'm wrong about something, but at least I'm honest. Anyway, let's begin with the stat sheet and we'll go from there. So, the Challenger 1 has a 120mm L11A5 cannon with 52 shots, basically the same gun that the Chieftain Mark V gets, although it's the A5 version, but effectively it's the same gun, and a 7.62mm L8A1 machine gun, two of them, one on the commander's hatch and one in the coax. The armour we'll get into in a minute. The tank weighs 62 tons and has a 1061 horsepower engine with a top speed of 56 kilometers an hour. This tank will do around 50 kilometers an hour on road on a flat surface, but generally speaking you're going to be doing around 40 kilometers an hour on mixed terrain. The tank will also do around 32 kilometers per hour in reverse, and ironically it actually accelerates faster in reverse than it does accelerate going forward. I find that rather amusing. Alright, so for modifications, standard shell we get the L15A5, sorry, which is an APDS shell. Yes, you get Sabo as stock for this tank. 408mm of penetration at 100 meters at a flat angle, going out to 383 at 2000. 160mm of penetration at a 60-degree angle, going out to 2000 meters at 150mm of penetration. A Hess shell, which at this tier is pretty much useless because everything has composite armour and spaced armour. First, fin stabilised Sabo round, 408mm of penetration, exactly the same as the Sabo. At longer range it is better, but I have only just unlocked this shell. The video footage I've got, the gameplay footage, was the game that I unlocked this shell in. So I was playing that match with the standard Sabo, so at least then you get an idea how effective the Sabo is. And it's not very effective, spoilers. But the fin stabilised round is okay. I've had some really weird bounces with it, but I think that was more my aim than anything else. The second upgraded fin stabilised Sabo shell you get is the L23A1 round. 437mm of penetration at 100, 420 at 2000, 205 at a 60-degree angle, and 197 at 2000. This is much better. It seems to hold its penetration much more at range than the other one does. It is worth noting that although this has the same penetration at the same distance as the Sabo round does, due to the way fin rounds, or at the very least fin stabilised Sabo rounds work in War Thunder, assume that this will be more likely to penetrate and do more damage than the Sabo round will. I mean, it may not be as good as the top fin stabilised Sabo round, but it's definitely better than standard Sabo. Right, now let's take a look at the armour. This is where the majority of my issues come with this tank. And if I sound a little bit depressed saying that, that's because I am. So the front of the hull, 50mm. Commander's area, well, driver's area, and this massive fucking shot trap, 60mm. Lower frontal plate, which is massive, 70mm. The front of turret, 50, 50. Gun breech, 200, but that's kind of nomenclature really. Trying to get it through that gap is basically a no bueno. Side of the tank, side skirts, almost 20mm. Side of the hull, 20mm. Side of the turret, 25mm. Rear of the engine, 25, 20. rear of the turret, 44. Top of the tank, top of the turret, 20mm, 38mm. Top of the engine deck, 20mm, with 8mm vents. Now, let's look at the composite armour, shall we? Right, here we go. Against kinetic, 400. Against chemical, 600. Which means the Leopard 2K with its standard heat FS round can penetrate you from the front. Front of the turret. Against kinetic, 470. Against chemical, 750. I've had a Leopard punch through my turret and kill me, even though it's 100mm of penetration more that is required than what the Leopard's heat FS round has. The Leopard 2K can still penetrate through the front of my turret. Yeah. 430, 700. Top of the tank, top of the turret actually has some form of, well, that's basically the composite there, should you want to see it in more detail. Fuel tanks all along the side of the hull. 130 to 300. 130 to 300. Now, prepare for a rant. Okay, so basically, the Challenger does not have the armour it should do. And Gaijin can complain about balance and not having the historical armour values all they like, but the fact of the matter is, this tank should at the very least have the armour to go head on with most tanks that it fights in this game. And it doesn't. It just can't. But we'll get into that in more detail in the gameplay. Right, let's crack on, shall we? To the gameplay. Right, here we go. Now, I imagine the majority of you that did watch my first impressions video for this tank are probably expecting me to break out into an angry rant and shout and swear and ugh. But I'm going to try my absolute best not to. Now, for this gameplay footage, we are on the folder map, which is actually my favourite map in the game, hand on heart. I adore this map. It's gorgeous. It's very historically significant, especially for somebody like me who likes the East German side of things. But more importantly, it's quite fitting for the period of the tank, which is nice. It's an added bonus. I couldn't somehow live with myself if I'd done a War Thunder review video and the gameplay footage was from Poland. Be a bit strange. Anyway, I digress. Now, let's basically go over the general way that this tank plays and the way that I play it, I should say. Now, the way this tank is supposed to work is that it basically drives like the Chieftains, by which I mean you drive it to a specific location and then you stop and snipe at enemy targets from long distance. In theory, this is a fantastic idea. It improves how effective your armour is, the lot further away you are from your target, and it lowers the chance that they'll spot you, and so on and so forth. The Challenger is also more mobile and faster than the Chieftain, which means it should be able to get to those points quicker. Right? That was a rhetorical question. It may be faster than the Chieftains, it may be more mobile than the Chieftains, but it's still the slowest thing at its battle rating, without a doubt. Without possibly the exception of the T-64A, this thing is most definitely one of the slowest tanks at 9.3, let alone 9.7. I mean, the Leopard 2K just pisses all over this thing, and that's only a 9.0, I think. I know it was 8.7 and it got up-tiered, but it might be 9.3 now. I don't know. I haven't checked. So, you drive the tank to the location you wish to snipe from, you get there, you put it into a decent position, and all other things being equal, you survive, get there, start shooting at tanks, and then suddenly realise that your gun is inaccurate. Now, the L11A5, one of the few things it was not, was inaccurate. It may have been slightly slower to load and fire than anything with an autoloader, or more strenuous on the crew, I should say, but it was not inaccurate by any stretch of the imagination. Now, I don't have some of the gun upgrades for the tank yet, granted, but the crew that I have this thing on is quite well trained, hence how fast the tank actually loads. I think it's about 8 seconds per reload or something like that. Slower than the autoloaders, but still reasonably fast to remain competitive. For some reason, the tank is not very accurate, or at least the gun is not very accurate, and I can't seem to figure out why. And then there's also the fact that for some reason the gun stabilizer doesn't seem to be working properly. That's not just this tank though, that seems to be a bug all across the board. Quick disclaimer before we go any further: should you notice me taking hits from T-64Bs and T-64As, which is what I'm basically fighting in this match, because we're just fighting the Soviets at the moment, should you see that happen, it is a fluke. It is not luck by any stretch of the imagination, it is not skill, it is not, more importantly, the armour of the tank, it is me getting lucky. I think a lot of people who review vehicles in War Thunder drastically underestimate how much luck actually plays into how effective the tank is. Every tank can have fantastic games, every tank can have bad games, but when they always upload videos of, especially for reviews, of tanks doing very well or them doing very well in matches, it may give people a false sense of security. This is more important with premiums, of course, because these people that are watching these videos are getting information regarding parting with their own hard-earned money. With normal tanks in the tech tree, this isn't so much of an issue, but it is something that you have to bear in mind. I personally believe in showing a balance between effectiveness and reality, how the tank can do and how you should expect it to do, which is why I'm showing you this video in entirety. I haven't edited the gameplay in any way, I'm just recording my voice over it. By the way, shout out to the other guy in the Challenger, he did a fantastic job at supporting me in this match. We weren't in communication or anything, but I'm thankful for him. So let's discuss the armour, shall we? Oh, Christ. Right, okay. I'm gonna basically go over, not in massive detail, the armour, in particular for the actual Challenger, not the one in the game, because I actually don't know what the specific armour values are. Not very many people do know what the specific armour values are, because as far as I know, it's still classified. Now, when I did my Challenger preview video, I was fortunate enough to have a friend, both in real life and somebody who's subscribed to my channel, who is actually in the British Army at the moment, and his unit used to have Challengers, Challenger 1s anyway. And when he saw my preview video for the tank, my first impressions video, and basically shit a brick as a result. Perfectly understandable. If the American Abrams had come into the game with as bad armour as this thing has, they would decry Russian bias, the Americans would go absolutely apeshit, the world would basically, the War Thunder community would basically go into a meltdown. That hasn't happened because I don't think very many people have actually noticed how bad the Challenger is, or at least how bad it can be. As I said, most YouTubers cherry pick their content to show the tank, or at least show them playing in the best possible light. I hold no grudges against this, I don't blame them. Nobody wants to watch content where they're constantly getting killed every time they get an assist. But at the same time, I believe in balance in terms of showing you what is and what isn't accurate. And getting 10 kills in a match may not be cheating, but it certainly is not an accurate representation of a vehicle or your skill. Everybody can get lucky. Now, the armour on the Challenger 1 is poor, believe it or not. The actual armour on the tank is supposed to have a form of composite armour on the lower frontal plate, which basically eliminates the massive frontal weak spot this thing has. In real life, this tank did not have that weak spot, and in the game it does, for quote-unquote balance, I suppose. But you also have the issue of the massive frontal weak spot. The the driver's viewport. Now, I was told that the driver's viewport is actually not just glass, which is how it's pretty much modelled in the game. The driver's viewport did in fact have a form of composite or active armour on the scope and on the actual glass itself to prevent the chances of penetration. Now, in real life, tanks engage at maybe 1.5–2 kilometers, especially in the Iraq War, but we'll get onto that in a minute. In game, that doesn't tend to happen so much. So even though your armour is more effective at range, you then have the issue of trying to hit your target at 1.5 kilometers, which I've tried with a standard Sabo and this gun. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. You can get lucky, of course, but whenever I have managed to hit somebody at those sort of ranges, I've hit their engine, or I've hit their tracks, or I've bounced. I haven't one-shot killed them. which, if they're moving at full whack, is really what you want to do, especially if it's a Leopard 1 or a Leopard 2 even. I mean, those things do 60 kilometers an hour everywhere. At that kind of range, if you miss, you're not going to kill them. So, during the first Iraq War in 1991, the first Gulf War, how many tanks do you think were knocked out? How many Challenger tanks do you think were knocked out during Desert Storm? I'll give you a couple of seconds to make up your mind. Thought of it? Right. None. No Challenger 1s were knocked out in Desert Storm. They suffered a lot of damage from rocket-propelled grenade launchers, T-72s, T-55As, you know, under the Iraqi army. But none got taken out. How many Abrams tanks do you suppose got taken out? I can't give you the exact number, and I wouldn't want to... I'm going to guess, but don't take my word for it. I think it's something around 5 or 6 during the whole campaign, which doesn't sound like a lot, and it isn't a lot. But 5 or 6 Abrams tanks being taken out compared to no Challengers, no losses of Challenger, basically speaks for itself. And which tank would you say is the most powerful in War Thunder at the moment? If you said the Abrams, well done you, give yourself a pat on the back, because you'd be entirely correct. The Abrams is a mixture of mobility, firepower and armour, or protection, which makes up the armoured vehicle triangle. I have said about this before. Effectively, all armoured vehicles, tanks specifically, are a mix of mobility, protection and firepower. The Abrams has all three. Yes, it has the 105mm gun because it's the M1, not the M1A1 with the 120mm. But that doesn't matter because it still gets fin stabilised sabot. It's fast as hell, both going forward and going backward. And it has ridiculous armour. And I mean ridiculous armour. I saw a video Slick did a while ago for taking out top tier tanks. And effectively it boiled down to, even if you're facing them front on, if you shoot them in the side, where the side skirts are, the shell will go straight through, basically ignore whatever armour they've got, because most main battle tanks of this era have terrible side armour. And that is accurate. Most of them have. And you'll pretty much take the tank out in one shot. This is great. And it does work on the Abrams as well, and the Challenger. But the issue is, the Challenger can be taken out from the front. The Abrams can, but it is harder. And it's all very well people saying you need to aim for the cannon breech and then get around the side of him. Two issues with that. Hitting the cannon breech even at close range is a bit difficult because you actually have to aim for it. You can't just fire at centre of mass, which is exactly what the Abrams can do to you. Doesn't matter whether you're in a Challenger, whether you're in a Leo 2K, a T-64B. They can just click at you and you die. You cannot do that to the Abrams. Now, I'm at risk here of basically making this review video for the Challenger a rant about the Abrams. But don't think that. I'm just trying to put the Challenger's effectiveness in the game into context. The Abrams is very effective and it is most certainly the meta. The Challenger is not. The Challenger almost feels like Gaijin trying to make or give the British tech tree for ground forces a quote-unquote theme. Kind of like how some tanks in World Tanks all have their own theme, you know, like, this is going to be a stupid example, but light tanks are all mobile, heavy tanks all have armour, medium tanks have decent guns and reasonable mobility, you know. They're trying to put it into a segment. They're trying to make the British tech tree the snipers for the top tier. So all the chieftains and the Challenger are all snipers, right? But as I said before, the Challenger is not effective in that role. You'll notice I haven't been doing any sniping in this match whatsoever. If anything, I've actually been playing it more how I play my T-64. Drive to where I think the enemies are going to be, wait, shoot at targets I spot. You know, you get the idea. It's more or less playing it like how I play my T-64, not driving it to the nearest hill, going hull down and expecting everything to bounce. I would much rather take my chances and go gun-ho. And in this match it worked. I got lucky. And you should not take this match as concrete evidence that it works, because I can never guarantee that it will always work. But it is what it is. So allow me to sum up my opinion on the Challenger 1. I can do it in one word, and it will probably be on the thumbnail and the title of this video. It is a disappointment. Gaijin really need to look at themselves in the mirror and say, how can we make the British a little bit more competitive at ground forces at top tier? I know, we could give the Challenger some more armour. I mean, they won't, because they're hard-headed and they refuse to believe that they've done anything right. I'm not saying don't research this tank. It's top tier. You're going to have to eventually. But just bear in mind, it's not as effective as you may think it will be. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share and subscribe for more. And I will see you in the next War Thunder video. Cheers.